Madam President,
The senator from Oregon.
I ask unanimous consent that the privilege of the floor be extended to Mike Zwolinski, a member of my team, for the balance of the day.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, I'm standing here at the desk next to the desk of our fallen colleague, Senator Dianne Feinstein. It seems enormously strange that instead of being able to sit here and have her next to me, her desk is covered with a black cloth and a crystal bowl of white roses. We come from the West Coast, where our states sit side by side, so perhaps it was fitting that we sat side by side here on the floor of the U.S. Senate. One thing in particular that Senator Feinstein liked to do was share with me pictures of her dog Kirby, who she absolutely loved. And she had a lot of pictures on her phone to show Kirby in different moments of delight. And I must say, for me, this was kind of a powerful personal connection because I enjoyed showing her pictures of my dogs, Roxy and Lila, who I love dearly. So even as we work on the great issues of international affairs or the big challenges of America, sometimes it's just the personal connections, simple connections in a life that can bond people to each other. Very few people's lives are full as much history and consequence as Senator Dianne Feinstein's. The first woman to serve as mayor of San Francisco, the first woman to serve as a senator from California, the longest serving senator not only from California, but the longest serving woman in the Senate ever at just over 30 years. In 2009, during my first year in the Senate, she made a point to invite me as a freshman senator to meet her friend, the Dalai Lama. I had had a chance to previously meet the Dalai Lama when I was head of the World Affairs Council in Oregon, and I had invited him to speak to the people of Oregon. But this was in a different context of the connection, the foreign relations in which we were striving to elevate concerns about the treatment of the Tibetan people. She was a passionate supporter of the Tibetan people. She had met him 30 years before in India. She had welcomed him on his first visit to the United States as the mayor of San Francisco. She never let up on the importance of that challenge and her concerns about the mistreatment of the Tibetan people. In fact, I also had the opportunity to work with her on the Congressional Executive Commission on China, which strived to shine a light on many human rights issues, but one of which certainly was defending the Tibetan people's human rights and culture from the repression of the Chinese government. And she was also a powerful partner as we worked together to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act here on the Senate floor, which we did in 2013, and then to strive to elevate the Equality Act, the gold standard for ending discrimination against our LGBTQ community, an act that we have not yet passed on this Senate floor, but absolutely should. And I hope someday we will have the votes to do that. because she just believed that nobody should face discrimination. Everybody should have an equal opportunity to thrive here in the United States of America. We also served together for many years on the Appropriations Committee and the Rules Committee. She was a persistent voice in this last couple years, time and time again, calling for better pay for our federal wildland firefighters. Now, that particular issue is so essential because of the fires we're facing in the West, and no one raised it as often or as passionately as she did, and as a result, we won that pay raise. And I know that she would be insisting, if she was here today, that make sure that pay rate is sustained in any continuing resolution that we might pass in the next couple of days. She knew how essential that was out west, that we have firefighters, wildland firefighters, who can work year-round and be paid decently, so we actually are there on the job. I was proud to co-sponsor her legislation this year, the West Coast Ocean Protection Act, to prohibit the exploration, development, and production of oil off the West Coast, a mutual concern of those off the West Coast, that our coast and our multiple fisheries, our crabbing, our whiting, our shrimp, our salmon, our groundfish are not damaged by oil, that our shoreline is not damaged by oil. Essential, she felt, that we preserve the health of our oceans against the potential damage from drilling off the coast. In fact, she was a strong voice in this broader conversation about climate change. She understood climate chaos and how the changing temperatures are affecting us in so many different ways. At one point, when we were serving on the Appropriations Committee together, I had a simple amendment that supported our international obligation to help fund the international or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And we had a deal between legislators on both sides of the aisle that we'd simply hold a voice vote because legislators across the aisle felt it should be passed, but they knew anything that related to climate was so controversial, and they didn't want to bring that controversy into the discussion about honoring a treaty obligation. So the agreement was to pass it by voice vote, and when I proposed the amendment, Senator Dianne Feinstein spoke up. I hadn't filled her in on the background, and she said, "This issue is about climate. It's so important, we should hold a recorded vote." I probably went a little bit pale because I wasn't sure as a recorded vote that we could vote to honor our international agreement. But fortunately, and just by a single vote, we did. So it worked out, but it just shows her commitment to having a public discussion, public votes, public accountability to take on this incredibly significant challenge that we have faced with the changing climate. Senator Feinstein helped open the doors of the Senate to so many other women legislators. She took weapons off the street. She believed torture was un-American and unacceptable, and those who are responsible must be held accountable. She raised vehicle emission standards and protected so many of California and America's beautiful outdoor spaces for future generations, including the interest she had in protecting Lake Tahoe. Yesterday, Senator Feinstein, who did so much to open this government to so many, cast her final vote in the U.S. Senate. It was a vote to keep this government open. Keep the American government serving the American people. She lived an exceptional life, a life dedicated to public service. She has left behind an enormous public legacy, a legacy of tenacity, a legacy of and willingness to build bridges across the aisle to solve problems. I hope that many of us can just hope to do as well. My thoughts are with her daughter, Catherine, and her granddaughter, Eileen. It was an honor and privilege to serve with Senator Dianne Feinstein here in the U.S. Senate.